Howdy y'all, TheJTJ here, roll2wound.com. We'll be talking Soulblight Gravelords, Tactics, Legion of Night. Alright, we're talking Legion of Night. We're going to cover the battle traits, the command traits, artifacts. We're going to talk a little bit about tactics, and we'll give some preliminary lists for you guys to look over. We're going to get right into it with the battle traits. And the first battle trait that Legion of Night has is called the Bait. Add 1 to the save rolls for attacks that target friendly Legion of Night Death Rattle and friendly Legion of Night Deadwalkers units in the first battle round. The old rule was better in my mind, just because you had that +1 save in your territory all game, so it made Graveguard really nice backline objective holders. However, this works really good for an aggressive build. You can get your zombies, your skeletons, you can get them, all around the board very quickly. And if you combine these with grave sites, you're pretty much an asynchronous deployed army. You can just pop up all over the place. The other interesting thing is your White King will be a 2+ save on the first turn, which is super handy if you want to, maybe be really aggressive with them.
Yeah, and one other thing is the old Legion of Night, there's only Death Rattle, wasn't Deadwalkers. And so this is a little help there, even though it's only the first turn. But if you're doing Zombie Horde or Direwolf, they'll benefit from this now, whereas they didn't before. So it's kind of nice. I agree with you. It's not as good as the old one, in my opinion, but still okay. But the bigger one for Legion of Night is the Ageless Cunning, the second battle trait, which basically allows you to have some outflanking in the army. So instead of setting up a Legion of Night unit on the battlefield, you can place it to one side and say that set up an ambush as a reserve unit. You can set up one reserve unit and ambush for each unit you've already set up on the battlefield. And then traditional things, at the end of the movement phase, you can set that one or more units up wholly within 6 inches of the battlefield edge, any battlefield edge, and more than 9 from enemy. Then at the start of the fourth, if they haven't deployed yet, they're destroyed. So this really allows you to pair that with the grave sites and even the Vargeist now that can deep strike, which can allow you to do something that I've been looking at and really maybe make a Alpha Strike or a Swarm list where you're coming in from all different sides. So I think there's some definitely interesting play with this that can be paired with the bait. You can outflank or use the grave sites to pop up, like you said, some Graveguard, which are super killy now, and you can make them a little more resilient in the Legion of Night.
Yeah, it's once again going back to asynchronous warfare. It's like you can totally surround, an opponent possibly with just tons and tons of fodder if you want, or like you're saying, deep striking in here and there. The one thing I'm interested to see is how third edition actually changes is if there is some rumors that the board size might change. And if that happens, how will this be affected? I will be interested to see if this makes this better, if this makes this a little bit worse, because it'll be easier for the opponents to sort of spread out and sort of cover more board space. That way, it's harder for you to get your units where you want.
Yeah, I think actually yesterday they confirmed on the stream that they are shrinking the board size to whatever 40k is. So it's like a foot shorter and was it like 6 inches narrower, maybe somewhere in that. So yeah, you're right. We're getting less board, which means easier to spread out. But I think it'll still be relevant. Maybe not quite as easy.
I'm gonna give this an A minus, just because the army and the book in general, you got a lot of slow units. Some of all your horde, all your sort of your battle line, or besides the dire wolves, are sort of slow. Um, the the good thing is that this allows you to move them up quicker, outflanking, coming in from all directions. So
That's right.
as far as tactics with sort of these battle traits go, I see it as a hammer and anvil style. Outflank your fast units can be the hammer. Alternative, just keep a few cheap units of bats or wolves in reserve to come out on turn 3 and take points. It is totally a viable option if you want to just say, hey, I don't need to put a bunch of stuff that's going to outflank. I just want to put maybe one small couple cheap units. So you know how it happens during a game all the time that you'll say, hey, these guys are going in reserves. And by the end of turn 2, a lot of times as a player, you sort of forget that those guys haven't came in yet. And you can really get in there, and it's not really cheating. It's just, outplaying your opponent and saying, haha, turn 3, these guys are coming in. And they're like, oh man, I totally forgot you had those 10 dire wolves that are going to come out of the corner. And you can catch some people off guard with that. I think the biggest thing players will have to learn with this Legion is when, where, and what units to keep in reserve. You can make this your primary focus of your list. You can come into a list building and say, I'm going to exploit the battle traits. Or you can say, hey, I like the command traits and artifacts, so I'm just going to sort of use this as sort of like as sort of a bonus to what I'm doing and not really the main meat and potatoes.
Yeah, that's true. And then the Vargeist being battle line. If you want to lean into that swarm tactic of deep strike, outflank, and grave sites, you can even just use Vargeist there. And then one nice thing also tactically is, unlike the Castili dynasty where you can only outflank your Blood Knights, in this it can really be anything. So if you're going up against a magic heavy or shooting heavy army, you can also get a little bit of protection on maybe your general or something if you outflank it. If you know that they're an opponent that probably wants to take the first turn, that can give you a little bit of survivability too. Gives you tons of options. This is definitely not a Legion that is short on options on how to play it.
Agree. So we're going to dive right into the command traits. And the first one is above suspicion. If this general is set up in an ambush using the Age of Cunning battle trait above, at the end of the movement phase, you can set this general up anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches from all enemy units instead of wholly within 6 of a battlefield edge. 40k players will know this is deep striking. You're going to get to put your general down anywhere on the board as long as it's 9 inches away.
Yep, it's a pretty good one. And so is the next one, Swift Form, which is super duper simple, which is just add 2 to run and charge rolls for the general. So if you outflank your general, that's a 2-inch reduction on your charge, so charge 7. And then if you pair it with cogs, it's another 2 inches. So you are potentially having a 5-inch charge, which is awesome and terrifying for Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon to throw at your enemy their backlines. So I think it's a super solid command trait option. Okay. So yeah, I just finished Swift Form, so if you want to do Unbending Will.
All right, Unbending Will. Do not take battle shock tests for friendly Legion of Night units while they are wholly within 12 of this general. No battle shock test for your big blocks of zombies and skeletons is super important in this army. This is a great command trait for a general that wants to stay surrounded by the big blocks, not necessarily one that wants to be flying around, sort of doing their own thing. I could see this really nice on a Bloodseeker Palanquin or a Coven Throne. As I dig more and more into this book, I get worried. I get so worried about battle shock on zombies and skeletons. I just keep seeing that they have abilities to come back, but those abilities aren't. You still got to take battle shocks on those wounds, and I think it's going to melt the blocks a lot quicker than we think. I can see that Unbending Will might be something that you start seeing a lot of people use quite often.
Yeah, the other thing is see in 3.0 if we get a lot more command abilities. They did say in the stream yesterday that generals are going to play a bigger role, and on top of that, there's more interaction with your heroes, supposedly. So I don't know what that means, but if you get more command points, then maybe, assuming they keep Inspiring Presence around in the way that it is right now, or just one CP auto pass, then you might not have to rely on this so much. But if we're still starved for command points, or they change Battle Shock to be like, or excuse me, change Inspiring Presence to basically be like add 5 to your bravery or something. You can still battle shock hard on that with 40 zombies. So Unbending Will right now in the current game state I think is a good option if you want to run a swarm or a horde type list. So I think right now it's a good one. Probably an A level command trait, but could see its usefulness maybe decline a little bit depending on next edition. So next command trait, Merciless Hunter, is add 1 to wound rolls for the attacks made with melee weapons by this general. So simple. You know, you can throw it on your Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, White Knight, any sort of fighty hero, even the actually where this actually would benefit a lot is that new
Vengorian
hero.
Lord.
Yeah, because none of his weapons count as mounts. So his talons that are d6 damage, and then the sword, those get +1 to wound, and then like whatever that one is, it's like d6 attacks. It's 4 and 4. That's pretty garbage, but it'd be affected by that too. So that's your best bang for your buck if you're really trying to min-max this command trait. So I think it's still good and still something worth considering taking.
Yeah, pluses to hit and wound are, you know, they're always in the contention. If you have nothing else, it's like, hey, that can always be very helpful. The fifth command trait is Unholy Impetus. In the combat phase, if an enemy model are slain by attacks made with melee weapons by this general in that phase, add 1 to the attacks characteristics of melee weapons used by friendly Legion of Night units wholly within 12 of this general until the end of that phase. So it's a great buff trait. Once again, something that needs to be on a Pelican or a Throne. It would be good. The only downside is the hero cannot benefit from this ability. It ends at the end of the phase. So if your hero's already attacked, there is a couple ways to get a second attack out of heroes, but you're pretty much going to have to use your attacks by your heroes first, kill something, get a buff, and then that buff can spread out to your other units.
Yeah, you have to be careful, like you said. Depending, it's situational. The other thing is placement too. If you're going to charge in with your Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon with this, and then a unit of, 20 Grave Guard, especially if they have great weapons, they're not tanky. They're very glass cannony. So you strike with that Vampire Lord, your enemy probably is going to retaliate on the Grave Guard, and then your Grave Guard get maybe wiped or take heavy casualties. So you need to make sure you set up for it good, but it's a good force multiplier. Add 1 to the attack characteristic. So on hordes, that's a huge force multiplier and can be a great command trait. It's just placement and timing of things have to work out for you a little bit. So I think it's good overall.
Yeah, I think if you're taking it, you have to know that you have it and you have to keep it in mind. It could be, the one thing I think about is you throw it on something fast and maybe that's Blood Knights are rolling around with them and you really get the bang for the buck out of that.
All right, the final one is Terrifying Vestige, which is subtract 1 from wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons that target this general. I think this is fantastic. Anything that is a minus to hit or wound on your big guy is big, but I actually like a minus to be wounded more than minus to be hit, just because it's a lot easier to get minus to hits, with some of the lores from this book, and then Gymnids. So you have other ways to minus their hits, and especially if the rumors in 3.0 are true where you can't stack multiple things, then getting 1 minus to hit isn't that hard in this book. But a minus to wound definitely helps on that, and they're a lot less plentiful in other ways. So I like to see it here, and I think it's super solid, especially if you're going to take a big... Well, really, it's good on any hero, but the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon is one that's going to be in melee more than likely than any other hero, so you'll benefit probably the most by putting it on him.
Agree. Probably if I'm running something big and nasty, I'm gonna look. Probably this is gonna be my first look. Is this? Do I want to put Terrifying Visage on it? Because I totally agree. There's a lot of rerolls for to hits in the game right now. There's just a ton of ways to do reroll to hits, but there's a lot more less reroll wounds. So this does, I think, makes it even better.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
All right, so let's talk about some command trait tactics. For me, if you're building a solo combat hero, I'll look at Above Suspicion, Swift Form, Merciless Hunter, and Terrifying Visage. There's actually several you can pick from. I think it's viable. If you want to make a backline hero, I go with Unbending Will. So it's according to what build you're looking for and what you want to do. But if you're frontline, you got lots of option. Backline, I would stick with Unbending Will.
Yeah, same thing. The book or the Legion of Night have several great things if you are building a general that's going to get is fighty and going to get stuck in combat. There's a lot of ways either to get him in there faster or to make it a little more survivable. But as you had mentioned, Unbending Will is fantastic if you're taking just tons and tons and tons of hordes and you don't want them to battle shock away as long as you keep that guy alive. So on a necromancer that can wound shrug to his horde that will now not have to take battle shock could be a good combo. So bunch of options, but I think my favorite here is, as you had mentioned, is Terrifying Vestige, although I am partial to Swift Form by getting that potentially 5-inch charge with cogs.
All right, let's move on to the artifacts of power. Vial of Pure Blood. Once per battle in your hero phase, you can say that the bearer will drink from their vial of pure blood. If you do so, add 1 to hit and wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by the bearer until your next phase. One use, a lot of one use stuff in this book. I'm not a fan of one use stuff. This is actually pretty good one use. I mean, it's not the worst thing I've seen in here for a one use. The good thing is it lasts into your next hero phase. So if you're fixing it, there's a possibility you could get doubled. Like let's say that you took the first turn, you can pop it, you can use it during their turn. They can pop it, and then if they get doubled, you get to use it. You can use it 3 combat phases in a row, basically. Now will your character be alive 3 combat phases in a row? I don't know, but it does have that capability. So it lasts a little bit longer than one use, I guess.
Yeah, but like you said, once you use it, it's done, and if you don't get double turn, then it's only for that time potentially, and it's good. I mean, you put on zombie dragon, vampire lord and zombie dragon, and he's hitting pretty hard, but still, I think there's some better options, but it's still a viable possibility. Next one, Shard of Night. Ignore rend characteristic of melee weapons when making save rolls for attacks that target the bearer. It's alright, I think. I mean, yeah, we don't have a lot of shooting, and shooting's kind of a heavy meta thing right now. You see a lot of armies with shooting, so it can help you stay alive longer. But what I don't like about this is if you go up against an army that doesn't have any shooting, or if it's an army that relies on volume of dice with low rend shooting or no rend shooting, then this is largely unusable. So you unless you're list tailoring, then okay, that could be decent. But if you're going to a 1-day or 2-day tournament, there's a good chance you're going to fight opponents that this has no use against, and it might help you against that one time you play against KO or whatever else. But anything that can help you stay alive against shooting is nice. But I think there's some better options in this Legion of Night list.
Yeah, I could see if you had 2 artifacts, this being used as maybe your second one that goes on a backline character or something, just because you maybe don't have an option, or that might be the best option because you're just worried about that shooting. But all right, Gem of Exsanguination. Once per battle at the start of the combat phase, you can pick one enemy unit within 6 inches of the bearer and roll a dice. On a 1, nothing happens. On a 2 to 5, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. On a 6, that unit suffers D6 mortal wounds. And put it in the trash can. We have the trifecta of horrible rules right here on this one artifact, which is it's a 1 use per battle. Okay, so that's the first thing. Then it's a limited range, it's 6 inches. Then it's a random roll to determine how much damage you're going to do in general. Like on a 1, nothing happens. So there's a chance you're just going to pop it, roll it, you roll a 1, you get no benefit. Then not only that, if you roll like a 2 to 5 or even a 6, it's still D3 damage. So even if you hit that 6, you could still roll a 1 next and do 1 damage. I just looked at it and went, man, this is horrible. This would make sense if it wasn't 1 use per battle. If this was every turn, I would be like, cool. Or if it was once per battle, D6 straight up. Or 2d3 or whatever you want to do, but just this combo, I'm like, why? And I'm obviously not in the designer's head. Why would you make an artifact like this that no one? I don't see, personally, me. I don't see why someone would take this.
Yeah, I think like it would not be broken to basically leave the rules as written, but it's not once per battle. But if you roll a 1, it gets destroyed. So you can use it every time, or I think maybe every combat phase might be a little strong potentially. You can make that argument. So you could say your combat phase, but you roll dice, and then you have a 16% chance that it gets destroyed. Still, it's kind of like the artifact in Gloomspite gets that a lot of times they give to the big troll guys that can wound and mortal wound shrug, but you have to roll it 1 at a time, and the first time you roll 1, he consumes the artifact and is destroyed. So I like that kind of little gimmick, and I think that's a good way to make things consumable, but not once per battle. So there's still a little bit of risk of using it. You could lose it the very first dice roll. So, there's still risk, but yeah, I agree with you. Rules as written right now, it's a trash can artifact. Alright, so not going to attempt to pronounce this, but the cloak. So, if an unmodified hit roll for an attack made with melee weapon that targets the bearer is a 1, the attacking unit suffers 1 mortal wound after all of its attacks have been resolved. So it's okay if you throw it on a fighty general, or not even a general, a fighty hero, like a vampire, lord, and zombie dragon. You can bounce back some mortal wounds to the attacker. The downside is they can all-out attack and re-roll their ones. So if they really are concerned about that, they can kind of circumvent your artifact. So, but it makes them cost a command point. So I guess you can look at it that way as well. Overall, I think it's a solid choice. One of the ones I do like in this list, probably my second possibly favorite artifact in Legion of Night. So what do you think?
No, I like the ability. I think it's a deterrent for sure. But keep in mind too that as rules in second edition are written, if you're in combat, you don't have to pile in, but if somebody is in range, they do have to swing. So it could be one of those situations where, hey, I don't want to swing on you and kill my guys, but they will technically have to do that. I do like it, and depending on your build, this might be the artifact that your primary artifact you put on your beat stick that you're running in there, just to say, hey, if I take damage, you're going to take damage too. So, all right, we get another fun name. I'm going to say it's Marburgs Claw, Marburgs Claw. In your hero phase, you can say that the bearer will carve sigils into the ground using Marburgs Claws. If you do so, add 2 to the casting roll for friendly Legion of Night wizards wholly within 12 of the bearer until your next hero phase. However, the bearer cannot make a normal move, make a charge move, shoot, or fight until the end of the phase. Solid artifact. It's fun. It's interesting. It does something. It gives you restrictions like, hey, if you do this, you can't basically do anything else. So this is the type of thing I love. I love the rules because it's something that's like, yes, this is a good ability. I want to take it. But there is a downside. If I put it on something really, that I wouldn't put it on a zombie dragon, because then you're just stuck sitting there. You put
Yeah.
something like like a necromancer, you put it on a white king, you put it on something that's going to stay in the back line, that can just stand there and it's not going to hurt you from standing there. But a +2 to cast, I mean, for Manfred, Nagash. I mean, if you could afford to put anything else in the list with Nagash, but all your stuff gets a +2 to cast, and it's just super strong. So
Yeah, it's my favorite. Was my favorite in the old book too, because it did the same thing. And I'd even consider it if it wasn't even an aura, if it just let the bear at +2 to cast. Because there's some things, if you really are doing a cogs build, you want the alpha strike, you need to get that casting value 7 cogs off. Well, now it's a 5. So the fact that it's an AoE wholly within 12, all your wizards get to, or all your Legion of Night wizards get to utilize it pretty big. So I think it's a A++ in my book. I love it.
yeah, the only thing that I wish it didn't say Legion of Night. That way you could get, Belladonna Volga and some of those other cool named characters from other legions. They're not
Yeah,
going to get the +2, but it'd be nice if they did, but can't have everything.
that's right. All right, and the last artifact, the Cursed Blade. After armies have been set up, but before the first battle round begins, you pick one enemy hero on the battlefield. In your hero phase, the bear and that hero are on the battlefield. Roll a dice. On a 5+, that hero suffers 1 mortal wound. And you heal 1 wound allocated to the bear. So, pretty terrible. A couple things have to happen. Your guy has to be on the board in a legion that likes to outflank and not be on the board turn 1. They have to be on the board. And so, and if either one of those is not met, then this just doesn't work that turn. You potentially can do some mortal wounds, up to a maximum of 5 over the course of a game, and potentially no mortal wounds given on the situation. So I don't like it. There's a lot of better choices in this Legion of Night. It's something, but I've never been a fan of, like, as I like to call it, chip shot damage. Too many armies have ways to like heal 1 wound, or something to that effect, and so I prefer things that can help spike damage or help you out, help your big guy out doing a lot more damage with his weapon profiles. So, not for me.
Agree. Probably wouldn't. I wouldn't say that if I had to take 6 artifacts, it wouldn't be the last one. I think Jim would go and be the last one, but this would be a close 5th.
Mm-hmm.
And let's talk some tactics real quick on these artifacts. All in all, the artifacts of the Legion are subpar in my opinion. There is a good one, but if you look across the board, I gave out low grades on everything. Um, and just a fluff wise, I thought it was interesting that Manfred, a lot of his quests and a lot of his stories in the book, he's running around collecting artifacts or looking for certain things, digging through old cities and civilizations. And I'm like, well, how come the Legion has some of the worst artifacts to pick from? And then I kept thinking about it, and I said, you know what? Maybe it's because Manfred has hoarded them all. He's got them in a treasure trove. So as far as the loadout, I would take, if backline hero, I'd take the Claw, and frontline fighter, it'd be Vial of Pure Blood or Shard of Night. That's the way I would roll.
Yep, Marburgs Claw is my number 1 for legions I already listed, and then Vial of Pure Blood would probably be my second option. But other than that, not really too impressed by the other ones.
All right, so let's just talk a little command trait artifact power combos. So when you're building your hero out, what are you going to put on them? For me personally, I think a frontline fighter like a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, I would take Terrifying Visage and a Vial of Pure Blood. For a backline hero, you could take like a Necro or the Palanquin, look at Unbending Will and Marburgs Claw. And I think, that backline hero type deal, that's a strong, that the Unbending Will and the Claw is a good combo. That's a good setup for it, especially if you're going to have something behind your front lines.
Yeah. One thing that I was thinking about actually as we were talking about this, like obviously the Necromancer is a good option to put the Claw on. If you really wanted to, so in the beginning, if you're trying to get out a spell turn 1 like Cogs, okay, obviously use the Claw for that. But let's say you're turn 3 or 4 and you're kind of still back. I think you could potentially still utilize this with Balewind Vortex, right? So you can get some range. If you're sitting on top of the Balewind, you can then carve the sigil in the ground. So like, let's say you cast a Vortex turn 1 or 2, and he's just sitting there, and you're on turn 3 or 4. Now you have farther range for your Lore of Necromancy spells. You can shoot those out a little bit farther range, I think, and have a better chance of them going off, if I'm not mistaken. Is it possible? That just occurred to me as we were talking about this. But what I was going to say is, even if that is not a legal possibility, I'd have to look at the verbiage of Balewind. But hypothetically, if it wasn't, Claw's still good. Put on your Necromancer, have him get some body blocking by some skeletons or zombies, kind of sit around an objective, and he can throw out some debuffs when things get close. So that's my favorite. But in terms of a combo, Terrifying Vestige is the obvious choice, although I do like Swift Form for getting... If I would pair that only with Cogs. So if you're going to run an Alpha Strike list, which is kind of what I'm eyeing for Legion of Night, you throw that on there, and it's possible you have a 5-inch charge turn 1 Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. And then you put maybe the Vial of Pure Blood on him as well. So I think there's a couple neat little options. A lot of it, at least command trait wise, looks like they favor a fighting hero. With this couple couple minor ones like Unbending Will that you could put on a sport hero, but I like the fact that the Claw, there's a few pairings here that you don't have to pair the command trait with the artifact. You see some of the dynasties where really it's like, well, I really need to make a pair for these two to work well. Like, I need to make sure my artifact is with my general that has the command trait to get the most benefit. But here, you can make a real fighty general with the command trait, and then you can put the Claw, your artifact, on a backline hero. So you kind of spread it out. So I do like those options.
All right. So just going to hit up the list ideas real quick. And remember, guys, this isn't supposed to be some power gaming list. It's going to auto win a tournament. It's more of like I'm looking at what is Legion of Night trying to do? What do they have? How can I work within those confines? And I kind of built a very slow hordish type army. Took a Coven Throne as a general, put Unbending Will and the Claw on it. The spell is going to be Spirit Gale. Necromancer with Decryptify, and a Necromancer with Overwhelming Dread, because we're getting the +2 to cast, so it's good to have some more wizards out there that can actually cast. And Necromancers, their spell set is just super good. Now, how long a Necromancer is going to live against a shooting army, I don't think they're going to live that long, but as far as what they can do for their debuffs and their buffs to your own troops with fighting twice, they're really good to have in any list. Then I'll take the battalion, the Death Stench Drove, with a Corpse Cart with a Lodestone, dire wolves, zombies, and then 3 Vargas to get that because they count as battle line, and gives you a little bit of options if you want to deep strike them. You can buff the big blocks of zombies. The casters will be +3 to cast. Vargas and wolves can outflank. It's a pretty solid little intimidating block of buffs and debuffs.
Yeah. I just thinking about it as you're talking. Like, do you know how much better this book would be if vampires could take the lore of necromancy? Like, that would be awesome. But so yeah, I think so. I'm trying to come up with, for my Legion of Night, it's quite a bit different contrast to yours. Although I don't think it would realistically perform as good because what you've kind of suggested definitely has the bodies. But mine is taking advantage of outflanking, deep striking with Vargeist, and grave sights. And it's kind of a alpha strike swarm strategy. So you have a necromancer, takes the claw, you cast cogs on a 5. All of a sudden you have stuff coming up out of the graves, outflank, Vargeist deep strike, and you can really push on one side. You can get a kind of a U-shape sandwich going on your opponent. You can completely sandwich one from either end. Like you have a lot of options. It's a gimmick. It's a if it doesn't work when you hit them that first turn, you're kind of screwed. So I think it would be fun though. I had never tried it. I actually had thought about it back in old Legions in the Gash when Legion Knight was around, was to try something somewhat similar to this, but Vargeist could not deep strike back then, so you had to really do outflank and grave sights. So you had the sandwich option going on, but now that you can deep strike with Vargeist, that allows you to be a little more fluid of where things go on the board. You can be all over the place, which I think is really cool. So those are my suggestions. You have some direwolves to be relatively cheap but fast, grab some objectives, be chaff, do whatever it needs to get done. Some Grave Guard are absolute glass cannons, and so they're slow, they are killy, so they want to get in combat fast, and I think this is one of the best ways to do it in the book, is Legion of Night. We talk about the grave sites. The thing is as long as you're smart enough where you set up your grave sites, then more than likely you can put yourself in a position to charge, to be within 9 inches. But if you're sloppy with your grave sites, or you're sloppy and your opponent's real smart, you might be in a position where, at best, your grave sites, when you pop out your units, might need a 10, 11, or 12 inch charge. So it's super duper important for the grave sites. Which again, I think this is why this kind of little list strategy is nice, because you have outflank options to come off the board edge, deep strike options. So there's really no one absolute unit that has to get into combat, and if it doesn't, you fail. You got all sorts of options. So I think it's a gimmick, but it could be fun.
And I wanted to
Yeah,
clarify on your command traits, above suspicion and swift form. You're not saying take both of them at the same time.
no,
You're saying those are your
that's right.
options. Yeah.
I'm saying those are the two options to use the tactic. That's right. If you want the easier charge or the deep strike or above suspicion to allow deep strike to a little more flexibility.
All right. And that does it for Legion of Night. Please like and subscribe to see the rest of the videos in the series. We're going to do a full Battletome overview. We're going to go in depth with all of these legions, all the rules, all the command traits, and all the war scrolls. So thanks for watching, and y'all be good.